I'm just trying to make it all make sense.
The
More.
You
No.
Podcast.
Today I want to discuss the concept of emotional freedom, as well as a test to assess the level of emotional freedom that you have in your life. These are both shared by Dr. Judith Orloff in her book Emotional Freedom. Something that aligns with crafting a life of significance, as well as something that everybody truly desires, is having emotional freedom in life. Having emotional freedom also correlates with how clearly you understand your purpose and goals in life. So I first want to go through what emotional freedom means, and then from there share Judith's test to assess the level of emotional freedom you currently have in your life. So emotional freedom is the capacity to give and receive more love. Getting there entails building positive emotions, as well as facing and releasing negative ones. Instead of spinning out of control with, say, anger after you've been hurt, you'll respond from a more centered and empathetic place. Emotional freedom also includes both personal and spiritual evolution. You learn to work with negative emotions rather than collapsing into them. Emotional freedom also helps you grow spiritually and rise above what is small within you. Also, becoming emotionally free means removing counterproductive emotional patterns and viewing yourself and others through the lens of the heart. You need emotional freedom to liberate yourself from the quicksand of negative emotions. When negative emotions accumulate, they disrupt your calmness and compassion, destroy relationships, and ultimately distances you from the joys and wonders of the world. You begin to achieve emotional freedom once you see that everyone has a lesson to impart. When achieving emotional freedom, there's two stages of emotional processing that you go through. The first is healthily acknowledging the raw feeling, and the second is to transform negativity. And the outcome from achieving emotional freedom is that you'll feel happier, more flexible, and alive. You'll also be kinder to yourself, your family, and your friends. You'll have increased patience and be able to effectively resolve conflict. You'll connect with your deepest instincts. The power of your heart will surmount even the most disappointing situations. And lastly, you'll feel nurtured and protected by a spiritual force. This spiritual force will let you know that you're never alone. And now that we understand what emotional freedom is, I now want to go through Judith's emotional freedom test, and it helps you assess your level of emotional freedom at this current moment. There's 20 different statements or questions, and you should answer them with a not true, sometimes true, or mostly true. Not trues will be scored with a 0, sometimes trues will be scored with a 1, and mostly trues will be scored with a 2. So I now want to go through the 20 questions and statements. The first is, if I'm angry with someone, I'll breathe and center myself before I reset. The second is, when I'm filled with self-doubt or fear, I treat myself lovingly. Then the third is, when I'm stuck in traffic or something doesn't happen on my timetable, I have patience. From there, the fourth is, after a hard day, I focus on what I'm grateful for rather than beating myself up for what has gone wrong. Then the fifth is, I rarely get snippy or cop an attitude when people frustrate me. After that, the sixth is, I feel connected to a sense of spirituality, however I define it. After that, the seventh is, I check in with my intuition, my gut feelings when making choices. After that, the eighth is, if I'm blamed for something, I rarely lash out and say things I regret. Then the ninth is, I fall asleep quickly and don't worry about tomorrow's to-do list. Then the 10th is, if my heart gets broken, I don't give up on love. Then the 11th is, I'm a positive person and don't make small problems into big ones. Then the 12th is, I don't seek revenge if someone treats me poorly. Then the 13th is, I'm not jealous of people's success if it surpasses mine. Then the 14th is, I quickly let go of negative emotions and don't brood on them. Then the 15th is, I'm not easily crushed by disappointments. From there, the 16th is, I don't compare myself to others. Then the 17th is, I have empathy for others, but I don't become their therapist or get drained by their emotional pain. Then the 18th is, I live in the now rather than dwelling on the past or future. After that, the 19th is, I feel happy with my life and not that it's just passing me by. And finally, the 20th is, I'm good at setting limits with people who drain my energy. From here, to calculate your emotional freedom score, total up the numbers corresponding to your responses. If you scored between a 30 and 40, this suggests you're experiencing a considerable level of emotional freedom in your life. If you scored between a 15 and 29, that suggests a moderate level of emotional freedom in your life. If you scored a 14 or below, that suggests that you're beginning to establish emotional freedom in your life. And a 0 indicates that you haven't found emotional freedom yet. Understanding what emotional freedom is, as well as going through this test to determine the level of emotional freedom that you currently have in your life, will allow you to increase the level of emotional freedom that you have in your life. And by increasing the level of emotional freedom that you have in your life will be much more fulfilling. And along with that, your emotional freedom will allow you to craft a life of significance.
I'm just trying to make it all make sense.
The
More.
You
No.
Podcast.